Does EastEnders writers hate women? This is a very important question. Obviously answered by, of course, two female representatives here. Yeah.
See, we originally were going to line up to have some women co-hosts do this, but they pulled out last minute, so you're stuck with us. Two men. That's a joke, of course.
Yeah.
It's our channel.
Yeah.
That's another joke.
And this is by old Calico, Calcio.
Calico, like the cat.
Calico, like the cat, as I said. Now this is obviously on the r/EastEnders. We were struggling for videos this week, if you couldn't tell. I mean, we weren't. We just took inspiration. And they posed the question that obviously me and Ash are going to answer. And maybe I might read a comment or two. Does EastEnders writers hate women? Why does EastEnders always have the worst things happen to women in the show? I know things do happen to the men, but not on the scale of damage they do to the women. It seems to be a common practice to either ruin their character, do bodily harm to them, make them endure the worst relationships, and constantly turn them into victims. Maybe I'm overly sensitive right now, but dang, can't we have one happy woman / family on the square? That's the emoji they used.
It's a really big topic, right? Because I think, obviously, yes, there are a lot of tragic characters that also happen to be women, and a lot of these characters kind of did become main focuses, right? You think of tragic characters in terms of like one of the most prominent characters. You have Ronnie Mitchell, you have Whitney Dean, you have these characters who ultimately, as hard as they may have tried, they just never really got their happy ending. And it's an interesting way, but it's not like, I mean, take Phil Mitchell, for example. Phil is an alcoholic who struggled to get over the guilt of being involved in a guy dying. He has had multiple failed marriages. He's a terrible parent to his kids. He has relapsed multiple times. He had a big depression storyline. And, just it goes on and on. Ben Mitchell, another tragic character, pretty much had this similar treatment. I don't necessarily... It's such a hard thing, right? Because a lot of the topics you do have, it tends to revolve around what would... I'm trying to word this delicately. You can write a man's grief different than a woman's in its own way, right? In how stuff is often portrayed. If Harvey lost someone close to him, he would probably just be very quiet for a couple of days, and that's generally how it would be shown because, it's that kind of older demographic of men don't really like to talk about their feelings. And it could be different from that. I mean, also, there's a different kind of kettle of storylines that typically get kind of given because you do have a lot more like birth, miscarriage. Are we past the 5-minute mark yet? Any sexual related incident. They don't really do that with men that much on these sorts of shows. It's not really looked at. It's not really taken to. But you also don't really get like any sort of domestic abuse type things. You don't really see it in soap displayed from a woman doing it to a man. Like there are just different storylines that people kind of relate it to. I think is the like it's not because it's not because the writers hate women. That's definitely not the case. It's just, in my opinion, and obviously take this and this also sounds silly because it's also I'm a man, but it's not really like I'm like no, I'm not trying to like mansplain this to a woman, being like, well, no, you're just not viewing it correctly. It's just in this way. I think I don't know. The writers don't hate women. Is the main point of this. They don't hate women. It's not how it works. But I do think the way that you can write, you write men and women differently.
Yeah.
It's not like And it's never like we see women being written like if you use the term male gaze, right? It's not like you can tell that like Harvey was written by a woman in this episode. That's like no, it's not really how it works. They don't really do it in that sort of way. But it's also it's the kind of backwards thing about soaps, right? You're trying to tell stories about real life things that happen. And you have them all grounded in this fictional like borough of London. And not many of them actually move away from London or do it. You have to have all these stories pretty self-contained back in this little small town. It's pretty hard to do. But there's only really so many angles you go for. Because it's, you can create a tragic character if a person has a terrible track record with men or a terrible track record with women, or you have them be unlucky in love and they never really find the right person and always choose the wrong one. Like, there's a lot more drama in having this stuff crumble, right? And this can go to their detriment as well, like with Linda and Mick. Linda and Mick should never have been split up in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. But they were because they just couldn't. They just wanted to play with the idea: what happens if we split them up and then they're no longer together? Does this open up new avenues for the character? It's kind of a really, for a writer, it may be a quite like an exciting prospect, but still, it was a bad idea. And it's also typically hard because if you have characters stay on a soap for an extended period of time, characters come and go, right? You can't have a character start off as they end. They have to go, if they're sticking around and they come in with a family, but all the family leaves, maybe someone in the family dies, or maybe the family breaks up and it splits up. You have to find ways to facilitate people being on the show. But also by being on the show, it means they're living a pretty horrendous life because not many good things happen to people on these soaps. It's not gender specific.
Yeah. You've pretty much summed it up. Hold on, I'm just gonna move up in my chair. There we go. My thoughts is like, it's they don't hate women. It's just more tragic things do happen to women.
No, sorry, Karen. I'll go.
No, I was just like, oh no, am I being pulled off the air with a bloody cane?
No.
But you know what I mean. Like, these topics do happen to men. It's not like specifically done to women, but you know what I mean. For a soap, it's more. I don't want to make it sound like it's interesting. It's not. But for a soap, do we focus on the man or the woman? Typically, the woman. Because a lot of these things happen to a woman. I don't really know what I'm saying. I'm very I'm tiptoeing around this.
Piggy's nervously dancing around. I mean, even take it. We had the Six, right? The Six storyline that whole year was built around men being awful to women, and we did see a lot of like depths that they went to try and show. And it's also a general I don't know. It's also a bit of a societal thing, right? Like, as much as we would like there to be, not everything's as equal as it should be. Like, there are still people who don't respect women. There are still people who treat women like objects. It's not like a fully, we want equality. We do want equality. We're gradually getting there, but is there still a lot of resistance towards doing this? But it's like with things with another slight off kind of tangent for this as well is because it's one thing that people seem to forget is that what most characters do, what most people they do in their lives. Most people, you go to school, you're born, you grow up, you go to school, you figure out, what your sexuality is, and you figure out what you want to do. And the thing with a lot of soaps is a lot of people aren't really career people. Some people don't have kids and have a career, but a lot of people, they do want to build that family. They do want to build a life with their soulmate as such. But being on a show for any extended period of time, maybe that actor leaves and the relationship has to split up. Maybe the character is killed off and you need something to happen, so they then have to go through all this grief. Like, it's a weird thing where fundamentally a lot of people, they do just, They build a family. That's what a lot of people do. It's what a lot of people want to do in their lives. They want to build a family with a person they love. And it's what most people do. It's like I've seen some people being like, "Oh, why is it like, with someone who's not generically straight? It's like, oh, why is it all about being in a relationship?" And it's like that's what straight people do though. Or a lot of straight people's humor does just become, "Oh, well, the missus didn't want me to do this." Blah, 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 it's that kind of nonsense. People, they have kids, they have a life, they build a family. Is typically what a lot of people do. And in order to facilitate a character being here in the long term, ultimately they're probably going to take a few notches. They're probably going to take a few hits, and it's just about seeing how it bounces back. But it's also a lot of these characters are kind of a lot of these like prominent women are thrust into these storylines, but they're also established to be really, really strong, right? Like, it's not like they're doing this to any random character. A lot of the characters who have these biggest and most tragic storylines are fundamentally the best actors and the best characters. Like Stacey, for example. Stacey was really put into prominence in that like late 2000s era, where she went from like kind of cheeky teenager to being like leading woman involved in the big whodunit. Like, if you take her from what, like, was she introduced in like 04?
04, 05, roughly.
You roughly take her from that time period and you take what happens to her in that time. She goes from like an extra essentially to a leading lady. And all that stuff was done as, Lacey Turner is fantastic. She is a great actress, and Stacey Slater is a great character. And when you have these lightning in a bottle characters, you don't just want to give them, hey, have a talk with Sharon in the pub. You want them to have these big, hard-hitting storylines because you want the most attention for your soap. It's like in Hollyoaks right now. In Hollyoaks, they have, and I've talked about it to death, so people who don't watch Hollyoaks but have probably heard me talk about her. They have this actress called Isabel Smith, who plays Frankie Osborne in Hollyoaks. She was involved in a sibling sexual abuse storyline, which was this really, really, really well crafted, about year-long storyline where we later learn where initially she's characterized as the problem child and her brother is the golden boy. But what is later revealed is that the brother is abusing her, and it kind of unfolds, and we start to learn why she is the way she is, what this happens. And this was a breakout storyline. The guy who played JJ, he's now in Coronation Street, immediately airlifted. Oh, you're in jail in Hollyoaks now. Well, time to go to Coronation Street, boys. She established herself as probably the best newcomer in soap over the last couple of years, and because of this dramatic performance and because of this really tragic story that helps the audience identify with the character, makes the audience believe in the characters. Ultimately, you typically have to have something not bad happen to them, but you have to have a reason to believe in these characters. And that's typically how you do it, is by giving them this big dramatic storyline. But still, Isabel Smith in Hollyoaks is probably the best soap prospect in the last couple of years, and has potential to be an icon in her first year. But you don't just go in the same way, because they delivered with that really big, serious storyline. You don't want to give the next storyline just be, oh, you just go and buy some crisp from the shop. You want it to be big. You want it to build on it. You want to build these characters to something greater. But the issue sometimes is some actors are just too fucking good at it. Ronnie got so many tragic storylines because she was too fucking good at telling this really twisted tale of a person who had an awful life and just everything went wrong for her. She was so good at it that it just had to happen. Ben Mitchell. Max Bowden, tremendous as a tragic character, but the main issue is when you start to keep doing this tragic characters, at some point you stop investing in the character because you're just fucking sick of them being unhappy. It's a really it's a tried and tested way, but not all writers can say no, because they know. It's like Whitney Dean. She's great. She is great. But after getting one really big dramatic storyline every single year, you just go, I'm tired of you. I'm tired of this. I just want you to be happy. Because fundamentally, you're supposed to believe in these characters and you want them to have a good life. You want them to have a better life than the one they've had. That's why you're invested. You've seen the vulnerable side of them. You want to see how they develop and you want to see them get past it. You don't want to see them constantly doing the same stuff back and forth. Once again, it's miserable again. And I think that's necessarily the problem with soap. You want to keep building on a character's momentum. You want to keep building and building, hoping that one day they will be hailed as a great character. You want them to become iconic in EastEnders stance. You want them to be legendary for any other soap. But it's a very fine line. You can't just give them tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, which, yes, some people will like, but through that time, that character will become a lot more frayed and a lot more spiky because, as said before, maybe the viewers don't want to see that character constantly go through abuse. It's just... And, yeah, I don't think writers know when the right time is to stop. Because it's hard to perceive what you view as a writer and how you view something developing versus how the audience sees them developing. Because it was basically till Chris Glenshaw came in that he went, yeah, we're not going to continue with this Ben Mitchell eating disorder storyline. We think Ben's been through a lot, and actually as a character we think he's just a bit tired. But had Chris Glenshaw not have come in, probably would have kept seeing Ben Mitchell on and on, continuing the cycle. Same with Whitney, right? Probably a chance Whitney would have had the same treatment consistently, and once again, it would have only done that to detract from the character. So it's that perpetual and infuriating cycle of soap. If you follow a character from the start to the end, unfortunately, the characters it would have come in with probably aren't going to be there 20 years later. So you have to find an avenue to pave the way and have them continue. But in the same way, if you do have, like Martin Fowler, why would Martin stay on the show? Why would he stay in Walford after everything horrendous happened? Well, because he then had a family and he was building a life with the people he loved still. But fundamentally, if he had any sense, he would have left 20 years ago. He would never have come back because suddenly his life was really rosy and all great before he came back to Walford. It's just in a soap, you're always at risk of being under fire, and it's not gender specific in my opinion.
Yeah. Jesus, I don't have
any of that you want to unpack. I laid out the red carpet for that.
You're like the politician when he has to speak for the country and he's just laying out this groundwork with the plan, and you're like, is he going to follow through with any of this? The pavements need to be fixed. Oh.
Turns out I'm gonna watch this back in the edit. I'm just gonna be like, what the fuck was I even talking about? No, I think that's some interesting groundwork, right? Because it is hard to constantly refresh and rejuvenate a character.
Yeah.
Especially if you know what they're capable of doing. So, at the end of the day, do you decide to give them something tragic or do you decide to let them be happy? And sometimes if you let them be too happy, well, yeah, maybe people don't like the character as much anymore. Maybe the character's lost its edge. Maybe it doesn't feel like you can carry those sorts of storylines anymore. It just kind of, you want to capitalize on the momentum whilst it's there, but also put it aside and you risk the character falling out of favor. So you keep wanting to, reproduce the same stuff, but also, you gotta know when to cut the cord.
Yeah, I do feel like you want a character to be happy, but some, just like you said, play it perfectly where they are better off just receiving trauma, sadly. And I honestly, you've literally picked apart everything. I literally do not need to add anything else to this, because if I do, it'll just be mumbling nonsense. So I guess I'm going to just leave you here. Can you shut up the original poster again, please?
Old Calico.
Thank you, and we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.